Glory be to the pals that lived alongside us in ages past, and whom we walked side by side as equals. Glory be to our beloved pals, with whom we bond with and must protect and cherish in this world. Let all who walk the path of Lily Everhart's FPA, who join for the sole reason of liberating and freeing, protecting and dedicating their entire life to the cherishment of these beautiful creatures who inhabit this world and would walk in it alongside them. While on the surface level, if one were to look to Lily Everhart, leader of the FPA, or the Free Pal Alliance, and perhaps even the founder of the organization, the FPA seems to be an upstanding organization dedicated to protecting the creatures we call pals and their natural habitats. However, if one were to look below the head of the FPA's icy, isolated tower, where not even a single camp of her followers would be found, one would see a very different organization, breaking nearly every commandment and requirement of her organization's ideals. The FPA, outside of Lily Everhart's idealistic delusions, appears to be nothing more than a gang of hypocrites.
Is there more to us than the words we say, the games we play? Can we know that we're not dreaming?
Just like with the Syndicate, the FPA is one of the 5 NPC factions that the player will encounter during their travels in the Palpagos Islands. Unlike the Syndicate, however, who can be found almost everywhere, members of the FPA are most often encountered around the snowy mountain to the north of where the player starts their adventures, and south of the northernmost desert islands in the archipelago. Also, unlike the Syndicate thugs, who run around with guns, rocket launchers, even flamethrowers and miniguns, the FPA forces the player encounter seem to only ever use crossbows and clubs, though there is a rare chance where, if they raid a player's base, there is a chance for them to wield a single-shot rifle. The fact that they don't use firearms, though, like the other factions, is by far their most notable trait about them, besides their various camps dotting the Palpagos Islands and of course the attire they wear. But how is the FPA formed? Unlike the Syndicate led by Zoe Rain, we have little to no information about how the FPA was formed, and despite Lily Everhart's diary entries being our best insight to the organization as a whole, we don't know much other than its primary goals and what its members' aims are. What we do know of the organization, however, comes from our interpretations based on what we see from the FPA camps dotting the mountain range. In each of the camps are various tents neatly arranged, both small and large, implying both temporary or even long-term living space for multiple members, unlike the Syndicate's encampments, that appear to be thrown together with whatever materials were lying around. Also, unlike their Syndicate counterparts, the FPA encampments seem to show organization and a level of civilization that seems to show a general care to the wildlife, as unlike the Syndicates with their walls, the FPA camps are open on all sides, yet at the center of these camps would be something that would both adulate and horrify their leader if she were to see them. Speaking of Lily Everhart, the leader of the FPA has a personality that borders on two extremes when it comes to her views on both pals and people. She leads the FPA much like Zoe leads the Syndicate. As far as her age is, we don't know much, but she looks to be in her mid-30s or very late 20s, though her white hair implies otherwise. Instead of a gun, she is seen sporting a spear and walks around barefoot, and like Zoe, we learn of her organization and her thoughts of this world through her many diary entries.
Pals, such strange creatures. Their noble beings have upheld our civilization since ancient times. They not only boast impressive intellect, reflexes, and adaptability, but are adorable to look at as well. How can anyone not come to love them? Humans are savage animals. With an insatiable appetite for the proliferation of their own kind, they subjugate other species and enslave them. They engage in pointless strife, consume flesh for no reason, and develop beyond their needs. When one takes into account their hideous appearance, how could anyone not detest them? Humans capture pals and use them. If a pal is confined to a so-called pal sphere, they become obedient to their master. What abhorrent tools they become. One can only say this is the greatest stain in the history of our civilization. Pals and humans were originally meant to live alongside each other in mutual support. Not a relationship between master and servant, but one of equals, a harmonious coexistence, if you will. Eating a pal for food is akin to blasphemy against God.
Unlike Zoe Rain, who seemed to view both people and pals in an equal light, perhaps because of youthful hope, Lily Everhart views pals and people as polar opposites on the spectrum scale, with her views of humans as being that akin to savage animals, and pals being adorable and wonderful creatures. She hates people down to their very looks, finding little to be positive about, and saying things like, how could anyone not detest them? Although, depending on how the player chooses to create their character, she may have a point, but that's out of her control. Another thing she notes in her diary is her utter hatred for the sheer concept of the pal sphere used by pal tamers. She mentions how, when a pal sphere is used on a pal, they become the tamer's obedient servant, loyal to their master or whoever happens to own the sphere. This view of the relationship between pal tamers and pals can either be skewed or supported, depending on how the player chooses to treat their pals, or even with the actions they take. As in the Rain Syndicate video, a pal rescued from a syndicate camp could see its new life as being vastly improved given the alternative fate it would have met with. Remember, despite Lily Everhart's views, how one treats their pals determines if her presumptions have merit or not. A human can treat them as nicely or as cruelly as one of their own, if they so choose, that is. Speaking of how one treats pals, one would classify Lily's way of treating pals, whether they are hers or not, as idealistic, just based on her next entry.
I will recount the day I met Lylene. I remember that the fog was so thick that day I could scarcely see in front of my very eyes. I was simply walking along the berry fields, as I am fond of doing, when I heard the clamorous voices of those abhorrent poachers. When I looked to where I could hear the sound of their filthy screams, I saw them throwing spears at a pal resembling a vivid lily flower. She was so beautiful and elegant. At that moment, I knew what I must do. I pierced their dirty hearts to the back and destroyed their scattered spears. They shot at me a few times, but it was a trivial matter. I could not touch such a beautiful flower with my trembling, blood-stained hands. Instead, I returned immediately to my base. When I arrived, I found the queen of the lilies there awaiting me. When she touched my arm, my wounds were healed and the fatigue began to fade away. From that day forward, I decided to become companions with my queen. She's the only flower that blooms in this sad, dark world.
It should be noted that in this entry, Lily, using nothing but her spear, defeated people with guns, using their battle with her companion, Lylene, to get an advantage. The battle seemed to have been bloody, as one would expect if they're using a weapon like a spear to fight people with guns, causing her to see herself, in her own words, as tainted. Despite being saved by her, though, Lily could not bring herself to touch Lylene with her blood-stained hands, but that did not stop her from destroying the spheres of the poachers. For reference, the poachers the FPA are fighting are, of course, the Rain Syndicate, who, as we know, go about and capture pals, whether wild or owned. and they don't care how they achieve the capture. But despite fleeing from Lylene and retreating to her base, which seems to be the tower she is guarding, she found Lylene there waiting for her. As an act of gratitude and perhaps companionship, Lylene then healed her wounds and now seems to fight for Lily, obeying her orders without the need of a palsphere. Why did Lylene choose to seek out and heal Lily, let alone obeying her after this encounter? Well, as the saying goes, to save another's life leaves them in your debt. It's not unheard of that when someone saves your life, you feel intense gratitude to the point of helping them regardless of what it is they are doing. Only until you end up saving their life do you personally feel that both of you are even. How often have we heard of stories of those who are willing to give their lives to save someone else that once saved their own life? The phrase, "I owe you my life," is not something one should ever say lightly. Lylene was saved by poachers thanks to Lily's intervention, and we know just from the Rain Syndicate video that pals captured by the Syndicate face a grim and unknown future, one where they are not likely to live. By comparison, following Lily to her home, healing her, and then serving her is practically heaven by comparison. To Lily, though, Lylene is a queen in this world, thanks to her willingness to heal her despite the blood on her hands, let alone following her, with how she romanticizes how pals are compared to her own kind, viewing them as akin to gods and deities, whereas she views humans, especially pal tamers and poachers, as akin to devils and fiends. It should also be noted that out of every pal tamer so far, including the player and those we will meet in the future, she is the only one who commands a pal without the use of a palsphere, as it goes against her principles and philosophy. Speaking of her philosophy,
won't you join the Free Pal Alliance? The Free Pal Alliance is a long-standing organization that works to protect pals. We have lived together with pals since antiquity, and each of us has a deep love for the wondrous creatures. We have 5 traditional commandments. Thou must not eat pals. Thou must not overwork pals. Thou must not abuse pals. Thou must not use pals for experiments. Thou must risk thy life to protect pals. Wouldn't you like to join us and protect the pals you love? Your life in service of protecting pals is a small price to pay. The flesh and blood of humans exists only for the glory of pals.
the Free Pal Alliance is a long-standing organization. If this is true, then this raises a question as to how long these organizations have been around, as both her third entry and Zoe Rain's diaries reveal that the Free Pal Alliance is indeed older than either of them, and their organizations predate their births. As for the ideals of the FPA, these traditional commandments, as she labels them, appear to be her own personal beliefs, as Lily Everhart's attire has her walking around barefoot, using a spear for combat, only relying upon Lylene for combat when faced with a foe that requires such power, and is willing to risk her life against firearms to protect pals, again, using nothing but a spear. One can also assume that she only eats vegan as well. When she says we can only assume she means the Free Pal Alliance instead of humans in general, given her distaste towards people. The FPA, in her own words, work to protect, nourish, and cherish pals, as well as defend their habitats, living alongside them and coexisting with them in harmony. A wonderful thought and belief, if somewhat blinded, because if one were to encounter or spy on the FPA forces in the wild, they would see another story entirely. The Free Pal Alliance are seen to fight the Syndicate on occasion, which is obvious since the two organizations oppose one another and have differing views on the treatment of pals. But what is shocking is that they extend their hostilities towards pals as well, no matter if they are the small, cuddly, and friendly floppies, or aggressive and powerful robin quills. Even the occasional B-Guard patrols that sometimes roam the mountains become targets of the electrified bolts of the Free Pal Alliance's crossbows. If one were to defeat the Free Pal Alliance soldiers, one can sometimes find cooked food on them from one of the more common species of pal. Already, the hypocrisy of the FPA is on full display. If these FPA members are willing to kill pals and even eat them, breaking at least 2 core edicts, not eating pals and risking one's life to protect pals, what other ideals of the FPA and edicts are being broken by the members? As another note, sometimes in the wild, it is observed that members of the FPA are also seen fighting each other, most notably seen around the camps. It is unknown if this is a simple bug or perhaps infighting between members who truly believe in the FPA's ideals and those who do not. Speaking of the camps, we must address the Mammarist in the room. What is with the cage in the center of the camp, alongside the statue of a Lylene, with the cage containing a pal seemingly held against its will? Why is it there? Well,
on some distant shore of the island, there exists an islet where certain pals live. Not a single one of their kind, strange as it may seem, resides on the main island. Perhaps they can only flourish in a particular kind of environment, or their natural predators roam the main island. Then again, perhaps they are simply unable to cross the sea. I do not know the reason they exist there, but I am certain that they must be protected. Just imagining those poachers setting up a hideout there and ruining their way of life is enough to make my blood seethe. With every visitor from the outside to their island, the pals' numbers dwindle. At this rate, they may even go extinct. I would like nothing more for us to protect them, but we have our hands full regarding this forest. As loath as I am to ask them for help, I have petitioned the PIDF to assist with their protection. In return, we must pay them a hefty sum, but it is worth it if it means protecting the lives of precious pals. It seems my subordinates have found a way to generate revenue. I will set aside those funds for this endeavor. It seems odd that they would be able to gather such large sums only through raids on the poachers' camps, though.
the islets that Lily speak of are called the wildlife sanctuaries in-game, termed sanctuaries probably by the residents of the Palpagos Islands. And it is true that certain species of pals call these sanctuaries home, and seem to only reside there. As an example, while ichthyordeer are seen roaming several islands, only the Terra subspecies of ichthyordeer can be found on one of these wildlife sanctuaries. A player attempting to visit one of these islands, even if only to have their curiosity sated, are warned that they are trespassing and are committing an illegal action. If spotted by one of the patrolling PIDF security forces, they will be wanted on site, without warning, and hunted down by the PIDF. The begrudging alliance between the PIDF and the FPA seems to imply that the PIDF only exists to protect people where money is involved, as wandering merchants are often seen with PIDF, and PIDF guards are only ever seen in areas where people exist, or where they are paid to stand guard. This also explains a question left in the previous video, why the PIDF are not seen stamping out or trying to contain Zoe Rain's syndicate forces from expanding their sphere of influence. Most of the PIDF seems to be stationed protecting these sanctuaries from the syndicate thugs and pal tamers, and Lily Everhart is having to spend huge sums of cash in order to pay for this protection service. Again though, why are the PIDF only willing to do this for money, instead of on their own? If they are the closest things the Palpagos Islands have to a police force, why aren't they trying to invest in protecting small settlements like the one we find early on? Or why are they not trying to curb or control the Syndicate's very public reach, especially the further north you go? These are questions we'll answer when the time comes. For now, it's safe to say that the reasons are not pleasant. But this asks another question. Where is she getting the money to pay for the PIDF? Well, as she said in her diary entry, her subordinates seem to have found a way to generate enough money for this endeavor of Lily's. She only questions how they seem to be able to find the funds, seemingly by only raiding poacher camps slightly, implying that perhaps she isn't aware of where her followers are obtaining this money. But if the cages in the center of the FPA camps are to be believed, with the FPA catching and selling PALs, perhaps the same PALs captured by the Syndicate being raided by the FPA forces, then where are they selling these PALs to obtain the money for Lily Everhart's needs? Well, remember, we already have evidence from the Rain Syndicate video, the black market. No matter where you are, the black market is always a place that is willing to deal with ill-gotten goods and are willing to trade anything for anything. Whether it's gold for the FPA or food for the Syndicate, PALs are just another form of currency. If you can slap a price onto it, you can trade something for anything that is of equal value. What a cruel irony it is that a statue of the Liline that Lily called her queen has a hand held heroically aimed toward the skies, representing the ideals of the FPA, glorifying PALs and showing their commitment to their protection and care, is planted right next to a cage that contains a PAL who, if the player doesn't intervene and rescue it, is probably destined for the black market, where its ultimate fate is unknown. All of this without Lily Everhart realizing what it takes for her wishes to be met. Lily is an idealistic woman who leads the FPA, an organization that champions a peaceful coexistence with PALs and their freedoms. They oppose the exploitation of these creatures, whether for personal use or for research. Because of this, they heavily oppose the Syndicate, who capture and use PALs to sell for food. But this does not mean they are the heroes of the world. They too harm and capture PALs, perhaps from the very same poachers or from the wild. But instead of food, they capture them for money. This money is then used to pay to protect a select few PALs that for the most part people can't reach to begin with, without the help of PALs themselves, or by some creative means that we are not aware of at this time. Despite championing the protection of PALs and her own personal beliefs, the FPA members are seen to eat PALs going against her ideals, the very noticeable unprovoked attacking, capture, exploitation, and even consumption of PALs, all under their leader's nose without her being any the wiser, implies that she either has no knowledge of these acts or doesn't care, neither of which redeem her. She sits atop a snowy mountain, isolated from any human contact, in such cold conditions that most people can't stay up there for very long, especially at night, in her ivory tower of beliefs as the leader of the FPA. How would she react to the sight of her members attacking innocent PALs, eating them and exploiting them in her name? One could only speculate. The hypocrisy of the FPA is in no fault Lily Everhart's. She cannot be blamed for the lengths her people must go to in order to carry out her agenda. But one cannot excuse her for being ignorant of what it is her people do behind her back, isolating herself to the point that the only human contact she has is a pal tamer looking to defeat her in the tower she guards. It also should be noted that, from here on out, unlike Zoe, who questions her role as to why she is guarding a tower, Lily never makes a mention of the tower, and no other tower boss does the same, nor do they ask why they are guarding the towers to begin with. While the FPA may claim to care for and treasure pals, just like with a certain real-world organization, they may say one thing, they are in fact, in reality, known for the exact opposite. As a side note, one of their camps is even located in an area called Hypocrite Hill, further proving the truth about the organization outside of Lily Everhart herself. But, as we leave the ivory tower of Lily Everhart of the Free Pal Alliance, I pose this question as I did with Zoe Rain and her syndicate. If you were to wake up in the Palpagos Islands, and you saw the creatures of this world, and how loyal and helpful they can be to you, would you do all you could to protect them from those who'd abuse them? And if so, what lengths would you go to ensure that they are protected? And if you are, would you be willing to join Lilyheart and her organization, the Free Pal Alliance?